Why don't we talk about the engineering principles that are required to develop these cutting edge agricultural technologies? You're all working together, but separately. So can we talk about those different disciplines and how they work together to drive this innovation?
Well, the interesting thing about robotics in general, and this goes back to, when we were in college, most of the guys that work with me, we all went to the University of Florida. And even at the labs back there, back in the 90s, we were always talking about, mobile robotics in general probably had its best application going to farming. I mean, we know it's true. We still talk about that all the time around here that we always thought we would end up somewhere in a field. And the interesting thing about robotics, especially when you're doing manipulation, is it's pretty much bringing in almost all the engineering fields. I mean, I've got electrical engineers, computer engineers, mechanical engineers, a couple other different kinds of engineers. But you're pretty much covering all the engineering systems that you need to do. I mean, we have interesting things on our harvester where we even do transport by fluids. That's actually moving berries around and stuff. So we do pipe building, we do a ton of different things, let alone actually having robots that can pull berries off of plants without damaging them, which is quite a task in itself. I can't begin to tell you. That's the interesting thing that actually keeps a lot of the guys I work with excited is that they get to touch all these different areas, and they learn a lot. And it's been quite a journey, I must say, to get to where we're at.
Well, I remember when I had the opportunity to see your strawberry harvester in action when I had visited the farm several months ago. And one of the first things you said was you pointed to it and you said, that's IoT right out in the field.
Yeah,
And you showed me the
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 apps that
the
all go with it.
GPS and yeah. So the data integration and the interoperability among all those agricultural technologies really it's stellar. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, do the other two of you want to weigh in on that?
Well, just to add a little bit to that, though, there is a very different component in working with this engineering from other things that I've done, and that is working with the farmers. And
Mhm.
what's kind of interesting to what you were just saying, Sharon, is we spend a lot of time designing, apps that they're going to be able to use with the machinery here in the future,
Mhm.
whether it's like how many berries did a harvester just pick, on their phone,
Mhm.
or where is the harvester, when's it going to be done, how are you coordinating all that? And there's a lot to do with that too, just dealing with a industry that traditionally did not have the technology, and then how can they jump right into it and be able to use it successfully.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Bob. With the working with the farmers was probably been the most interesting and fun part of it. I come from a farm background myself. In fact, my first weed tool in the field was a machete, and so we've come a long ways from the machete, getting weeds out of fields. But I think working with the farmers, they want to understand what's happening in their field, even if, let's say, we're deploying our drones to identify a weed count, a weed pressure, even a blossom count, let's say, depending on the crop. We can give them an idea halfway through the year what kind of harvest they can expect at the end of the year. So if they're deploying robots, then if they have a prescription map from us, let's say, working with them to make sure that that map is accurate and gets them more efficiency in the field if they're deploying this. The farmers like that because they don't want to be dealing with the data anymore. They want to see results. And if you're going to bring the results, it's all about the results, right? So we got to show that to them every day. And so in some cases, we fly those fields maybe 3 times a week. It kind of depends on what's happening and what's organic, conventional, what kind of crop it is. But I think the farmer is really involved. They're tired of looking at data and hearing about data. They just want someone to process it. And so we give them a dashboard that shows everything they need to see every day. And then before the robots are deployed, It makes it super easy for them. They sleep a lot better at night, let me tell you what. And they're excited to know what that potential yield might be at the halfway point and possibly towards the end.
Yeah, and in our work, we are like one step removed from the end application, right? As a technology platform provider for AgTech, we work with Harvest Crew and SkySense to take our technology to the end customer, so they get to exposed to that challenges there. But within the scope of what we do, we see the robotics as a highly interdisciplinary engineering problem. And so when we are thinking about the product, we need to think about all these different personas within these companies. And there is a lot of engineering teams that have to come together to realize a robotics product. You have to have camera people who really understand camera. You have to have electrical people who really know how to design the board so that it can survive that harsh, rugged environments. You absolutely need the brightest AI engineers and developers who can look at the different algorithms, the ever-changing landscape of AI. An important aspect of what we build is simulation and digital twins. So you need to have people who have that background in some background in modeling of these things with simulation tools, so you can create the sets or assets, 3D library that you need for simulating. When you're collecting that amount of data, you have to bring in IT teams that are going to manage your infrastructure and make sure that all the data is kept secure. So you have to talk to security people. So I think, as we build our platform for robotics, we have to think about all of these personas and how they're going to engage with our product to actually build the application. So you're absolutely right. It's highly multidisciplinary field with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, IT people, AI engineers, data engineers, all having to come together to actually realize an application which the end customer can get value out of.